Number 1.
Greg Allen Haskell, age 19, vanished from Stuart, Florida on April 21, 1985. Greg was last seen walking near the Little General convenience store on East Ocean Boulevard at about 8 a.m. He lived in an apartment with roommates on Astorwood Place after moving to Stuart from Wisconsin, following graduation from high school. He was working as a construction laborer. Newspapers state that on April 30th, over a week after the last confirmed sighting of him, Greg had called his parents and wanted to return to Wisconsin. The Charlie Project adds that he seemed unhappy. His parents sent him $100 in cash for a bus ticket, but there is no evidence that he purchased one. His belongings, including a non-functioning motorcycle and clothing, were left behind at his residence. It's not known whether smaller items, like his wallet, were left behind as well. There is very little media coverage of Greg's disappearance, and what little there is recent. Several Florida papers ran slightly different versions of the same narrative in 2015, when Greg's case was reopened, and a DNA sample was requested from his family. The articles don't mention him being seen walking on April 21st, but do state that his parents spoke to him on April 30th. There are so many missing pieces, though. If he communicated with his parents on April 30th, and was supposed to be living in an apartment with roommates and working, how did nobody see him since April 21? Perhaps the wrong dates were published by the media. I found a press release in the NamUs file, which indicates that he was reported missing on April 30th, after he never showed up in Wisconsin, and several attempts to contact him were unsuccessful. With contradictions on the dates, I'm not sure if the sighting on East Ocean Boulevard was before or after his parents spoke to him. There's also no indication of when his roommates and employers saw him last, therefore no way of knowing if he ever received the envelope from his parents. I know nothing about his roommates, but my first thought was that perhaps one of them found and pocketed the cash, leading to an altercation of some sort. The Little General store no longer exists in Stuart, but East Ocean Boulevard was about 3.5 miles from his residence. It's certainly a doable walk, but unless his job was in that area, it seems unlikely to me that he'd be there with no vehicle at 8 a.m., or that someone would notice and recognize him. Then there are questions that nobody may know the answers to. Why was he unhappy in Florida? Had something specific happened, or was he just generally discontent? The fact that his case was recently reopened suggests it had been closed, even though he was never found. Although Greg's brother traveled to Florida to search for him, it doesn't sound as though his disappearance was taken very seriously by police at the time. It's unfortunate, as answers would have been easier to obtain when his roommates still lived in the apartment, his boss would have had his work records on hand, and the Little General store was still there. I am hopeful that someone who knew him down in Florida, a co-worker, a roommate, or even a girlfriend, will see this and provide some information that could help his family bring him home.
Number 2.
Satori Manchester, age 26, was last seen in Newark, Delaware on June 29, 1980. Anne was a student at University of Delaware at the time, and was just 3 days shy of receiving her master's degree in business administration. Although Anne was last seen by friends on June 29, no one realized she was missing until her parents returned from vacation on July 8. It was then that Anne was reported missing, as her parents were unable to locate her. On the morning of June 29, Anne was visited by a male friend, who stated that he left around 12:30 p.m. He recalled her wearing denim cut-off shorts and a t-shirt, but couldn't be more specific. A female friend spoke with her on the telephone later that afternoon, and nothing seemed amiss. Anne lived alone in a third-floor apartment at the Villa Belmont Apartments on Walsh Tract Road. The apartment appeared undisturbed inside, though the front door was unlocked. A stack of textbooks was on a table, as though she had been studying. A pair of sandals was underneath the table. Her car was parked outside, and her purse, cigarettes and keys were inside the apartment. Anne's friends and parents stated that Anne did not like to walk places, she preferred to drive. She had dated a little, but had no serious relationships. She'd never been married, despite being described as wearing a silver wedding band. Her family could think of no one who would want to harm her, but do not believe she left on her own. Anne was born in Delaware, but lived in Walnut Creek, California for much of her childhood, before returning to her home state with her family in the late 1960s.
Number 3.
Lana Renee Merritt, age 16, was last seen in Syracuse, New York on February 23, 1983. Lana, who sometimes called herself Tina, Lisa or Colleen, was last heard from on the morning of her disappearance, when she called her grandmother to say she was with friends and would be home soon. She told her grandmother she was at a payphone near James and Townsend Street. She was never heard from again. Lana had dropped out of high school and moved from her mother's home to her grandmother's. She'd begun to associate with a rough crowd and had been arrested for prostitution. She was scheduled to appear in court the day after she went missing. Lana had previously told her grandmother that if anything happened to her, that a specific male individual should be looked into. It's unknown whether this person was investigated, or if she was presumed to be a runaway. She is known to have run away from home in the past. She is believed to have been carrying only a shopping bag full of clothing. All her other personal belongings were left at home. Lana's grandmother described her as a good kid who was too trusting and could be easily influenced by people who were nice to her. Pam Southard, who was just shy of her 16th birthday, vanished from Syracuse a couple months after Lana's disappearance. Like Lana, Pam also had a couple run-ins with the law and had run away on previous occasions. It's not clear whether Pam has since been located, but a 1990 article indicated she was still missing at that time, which was 7 years later. She doesn't seem to appear on any missing persons databases now, so I'm hopeful that she eventually turned up safe. If so, perhaps she knew Lana and could suggest ideas of where to look.
Number 4.
Agnes Shu, age 37, disappeared from Glenville, New York on June 18, 1979. Agnes, who usually used the name Ginger, was last seen at her home at 30 Old Coach Road. Neighbors reported seeing Ginger and her husband, Richard, eating breakfast on their porch before he traveled to New York City for work. None of the neighbors knew the Shus well. They were described as a quiet couple who kept to themselves, though they would often see Ginger out jogging. When Richard returned home 4 days later, there was no sign of Agnes, and no sign of a struggle in the home. Authorities did not initially suspect foul play, despite the fact that her thyroid medication, purse, car keys and beloved dog were found inside a residence. 2 months prior, Richard Shu had gotten a new job with a trucking company in New York City, and would stay in the city for extended periods of time, returning to their rented Glenville home on weekends. Ginger had recently left her job as an accountant with NL Industries, and was in the process of packing up to relocate with Richard near New York City, so they wouldn't be separated all week. Richard did not cooperate with the investigation into Ginger's disappearance. He quickly moved to New Jersey, and has not been willing to speak with investigators, even to this day. In 2011, a pair of police officers, while taking a walk, noticed an area of ground that appeared to have an unusual indentation. Since the spot was in close proximity to the Shu's former home, they decided to excavate. Cadaver dogs were brought in as well, but nothing was found. Agnes had once been a Franciscan nun. She met Richard when both worked at a Six Flags amusement park. The pair lived in New Jersey for a time, before moving to Glenville. Richard owned a transmission shop, which ultimately went bankrupt. As a result, he accepted the job in New York City. Agnes ordinarily maintained regular contact with her sister, and her disappearance is now classified as suspicious.
Number 5.
Leslie Ann Porter, age 19, went missing from West Covina, California on January 19, 1984. Leslie was last seen by her husband, Michael, in their Center Street apartment on the morning of her disappearance. She had planned to take her vehicle to a mechanic that morning at 10 o'clock, and she was scheduled to work at Robinson's in the Puente Hills Mall at 1 p.m. She never arrived at either location, nor did she call her mother for a ride from the auto shop, as had been arranged. When her husband returned home from work that evening, he found the apartment unlocked, and Leslie's truck still parked in the parking lot. Inside, he found her purse, and nothing in the apartment was missing, despite there being thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment inside. Although the door was unlocked and lights were on, there was no sign of forced entry or of a struggle, except a pair of earrings that were on the living room floor. It appeared as though Leslie had stepped out momentarily, with the intention of coming right back. Leslie's husband was active in the search for her. He distributed flyers as far away as San Diego, contacted psychics, and sought out media coverage. He participated in searches as well. A $15,000 reward was offered for her return, but police received only vague leads of women who resembled Leslie. According to all who knew Leslie, she was a responsible woman who never missed work or left without warning. She had recently been promoted at her job, and was in the middle of planning a bridal shower for one of her friends. There were no known marital problems. Everyone described her as happy, and not the type of person to hide her problems. Although it appears that her husband, Michael, was ruled out as a suspect once it was proven that he was at work, I can't help but be curious about who, other than her husband, saw or heard from her last. Is it possible something happened the night before, or earlier that morning before he went to work? Based on his behavior in the wake of her disappearance, my gut tells me he wasn't involved. However, a website's thread includes a few posts from one of Michael's relatives, who has heard that some family members of his suspected that he may have been involved. I have no idea why, or if these relatives knew of problems in the marriage that weren't reported at the time. Michael has since moved to Colorado and started a family, though this occurred long after Leslie vanished. Leslie's parents are both deceased. She has a brother still living.